So I'm not going to leave this alone. Left for Dead, the Indianapolis. And here's an interview by Ed or Edgar or L. His name ends in EL. And by the way, that's part of the coded system. EL is, in Hebrew language, God. Let's listen to him recount his fantastic story of the sinking of the Indianapolis by Japanese torpedoes.
Tell me, you were in the Marines, and how did you end up on the USS Indianapolis, and what was your task on board?
Okay, after boot camp, they said, Marine, you're going to sea school, which meant that I would be seagoing. And then later, after sea school, they sent me up to San Francisco. There was the big USS Indianapolis, and that was to be my home for the duration of the war. And we had charge of all guard duty aboard. There were 39 of we Marines aboard. And then we manned anti-aircraft guns, 5-inch and 40mm, yes.
And tell me about one...
Okay, so basically they're saying the Indianapolis was out and about during World War II. Most likely it was just a piece of junk sitting in dock somewhere. And everything is fantasy. Everything. It also was called the Ship of State for FDR, and all those who would have been aboard would have been complete and total in on the cabal system, the hoax lie system. So everything about it is phony, and this man, this actor, is phony, and the story that he's telling you is phony. But he's a good storyteller and does a pretty decent job of lying.
One day you're in San Francisco and there's this very large crate that is brought aboard the Indianapolis. Tell me about that.
Yeah, on July the 16th, 1945, at Hunters Point, San Francisco, we looked out on the dock and we saw all kinds of Navy Marine brass out there. And we knew something was up, and then we saw a little truck come up with a large crate on it and our crane.
Now, there's a little bit of a contradiction for you. A little truck with a large crate. So when you invent stories, sometimes there are inconsistencies. A little truck with a large crate. Oh, I wonder what was in that crate. Oh, something magical.
The board ship reached over and picked that up and set it on the quarterdeck, and my Marine lieutenant said, Corporal Harrell, follow that into the port hangar deck. Well, Captain Parks, what is that? He said, we don't know, and we didn't know.
So that turned out to be Little Boy, one of the...
You like the little smiles that he does? He's constantly smiling, so... But the little extra smiles make it even extra special. Now help him out is that little boy, and then later will be fat man. Little boy and fat man. Contrasts, right? Like black and white, positive, negative, yin and yang. Little boy and then later fat man. Dualism. The mystery religions are based on dualism. Occultism is based on dualism. So that's your clue. Just the title of the so-called atomic bombs.
Atomic bombs that was dropped in Japan. So did you guard it? Were you with the...
I stationed a guard and guarded it, and then momentarily there were two proposed to be Air Force officers that came aboard, and they had a little metal canister that they set on the quarterdeck, and a couple of sailors picked that up for them, and they took that up to a certain compartment and put that in there. Now, I might just get ahead of the story and say that was all the uranium that, half of all the uranium that America owned, and I stationed a guard and guarded that. And those Air Force officers were not Air Force officers. They were scientists from Los Alamos, New Mexico. So that tells you what.
So many contradictions. If uranium is so radioactive and they just put it in a little canister and put it right in front of them. You see what I mean? Uranium. Uranium. It rains in your brain. Because uranium is just stupid nonsense too. But people believe it.
What they had.
Right.
And it took the two of that to form the atomic explosion that later was dropped at Hiroshima on August the 6th, I guess.
Yeah. So take me to the night of the sinking. Had you just gotten off duty, and what were you doing?
Okay, I had just gotten off a watch at 12 o'clock, went below deck, and got my blanket because a good captain said you can make your pallet out on the open deck. And I went all the way forward, not with my K-Box life jacket, that's locked up in my locker, but I have my blanket, and I made me a...
Linus had a blanket too, security blanket. With the blanket over your head. Blankety blank, blanket of lies.
pallet right down under the barrels of #1 turret, the big 8-inch guns.
And were you awakened by the first torpedo, or were you still awake?
Well, yes.
Were you awakened by a torpedo explosion? What a good question to ask, huh? Well, you know, some people are pretty sound sleepers. Even a torpedo explosion might not awaken them. Especially if it cuts the boat in half.
The first torpedo cut the bow of the ship off, which was within 30 or 40 feet of me, and I knew that the bow of the ship was cut off. The second one was back under #2 turret, the big 8-inch gun, and a massive explosion. All that powder magazine went up, and so you knew the ship was doomed. And with that bow cut off and those screws pushing, all that water coming in, you could feel and hear the boat.
In other words, he was screwed. He was disemboweled. So are you, if you believe all this nonsense.
Heads down below breaking.
And so tell me, how did you get in the water, and what was the conditions like when you landed in the water?
Well, actually, I made my way to...
Did you put your little pinky toe in the water to see if it was cold? What were the conditions of the water? How'd you get in the water? Now, the gal interviewing him probably truly believes every single word. You can just sort of tell by her voice that she believes it all. But if you look at his nonverbal, you'll know he just loves to tell stories. He's a good storyteller.
To my emergency station back midship, and without a life jacket, my Marine lieutenant was there, and I said, "Lieutenant Stauffer, permission to cut down those new supply of life jackets." He said, "Not until we get word to abandon ship." Well, the ship is sinking on the starboard.
So listen to how ridiculous that sounds. The ship's cut in half, the water's coming in, and he's requesting permission to get life jackets. And the guy who's in charge says, "Not until we get orders to abandon ship." Now, in a real life emergency, people just do what they have to do. All right? So it's so stupid.
Side, normally the deck, quarterdeck, would be 8 feet above waterline, but there's water on the quarterdeck. The first 100 yards the ship is already under, and so you're desperate, you know, to get a life jacket, and then for word to come down to abandon ship.
So you finally got a K-pot jacket. Tell me, how did you end up into the water?
Well, I ended up in the water to go to the port side and hold on to that rail, look out and...
Yeah, just hold on, you know, put your leg in a little wee bit to be sure you want to do it, right? How'd you get in the water? What a good question.
The blackness of the night, and the ship is leaving you, and you know you're desperate to get off, and you look at that half-inch of black oil, but you're going to go into that, and you do, and you're going to wear it for 4.5 days, yes.
You. So I hope you just got off the ship and you got some oil on your face and in your eyes. And now you're going to be drenched in oil. Be a real tar person, tarred in oil. Next thing you know, you need some feathers in the story. Tar and feather, everybody.
We surmised that maybe 300 didn't even get off the ship, and there was 1197 aboard, so some 900 maybe.
1197, so if you take the 11 and the 9, that's your 9/11 code, which is a death code, whether you think it's real, R-E-A-L, or R-E-E-L, it doesn't matter. 9/11 is a death code.
Got in the water, but most of them didn't make it to end of 4.5 days.
And were you just bobbing then with your life jacket in a group of people?
Yes, you got a K-pot jacket, and
It reminds me of a song. When the red, red robin comes bob, bob, bobbing along. They were just bobbing around like bobbleheads. They're just bobbing in the water, 4.5 days, covered in oil. But it gets worse. I mean, the lies get worse.
if in the daytime, you know, you got swells of water, and you aren't just sitting back in the K-pot jacket, you're having to swim to protect yourself. Yes.
Yes.
So you're working
Right.
to stay alive, yes, the whole time.
And tell us about the sharks. When did you first see the sharks arrive?
Well, I have to say that daybreak, the first.
Do 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 do. Can you see Jaws coming? Now my other video, in the movie Jaws, they're on the boat, and one of the dudes on the boat has a tattoo because he was on the Indianapolis. And he will tell you about the horrors of sharks. And that's what spurred this book, by the way. Supposedly the author of this book, as a youth, watched the movie Jaws and heard that story, and then decided to do a research project on the Indianapolis for school, and then came up with the idea that maybe there's more to the story, and found out that supposedly the U.S. Navy knew the Japanese were in the area and never warned Captain McVeigh. So Captain McVeigh needs to be exonerated. He wasn't a coward, he wasn't negligent or anything. He didn't know the Japanese were in the water, according to this student and the students. Now again, that's all orchestrated and part of the hoax lie system too. The student and the book Left for Dead and so forth. But it's all tied into sharks now. Sharks, the man-eating sharks, and they're so hungry. They can't wait to get a bobbing along sailor in the water. Sharks are fake, by the way.
First day, we saw fins, out at a distance, swimming around. They weren't attacking the
dolphins,
group,
if you
but
saw
it isn't long
anything,
until a straggler
out
would
just
be out there, and you'd hear a blood-curdling scream, and you
suntan on
look,
the
and you
Indianapolis.
see that K-Pot go under, and you dare not to go. You wait, but you'd like to know who your buddy might have been. But it's so happening so often that we're just losing boys every little bit. And when you do.
Now, one thing I'd like to pick up on is his statement, we're losing boys. And I know that when Bob Hope did all his nonsense stuff, he always talked about our boys overseas, our boys in Korea, our boys in Vietnam. Well, did you ever stop and think there's a reason for that? It's because they're belittling the people who genuinely serve the country. They're belittling them, making fun of them. Why would you want anyone to call you a boy if you put on a uniform and went into training and said, I'm willing to get wounded or die for my country? So they're belittling them. And they're belittling you too, because you accept this. Oh, our boys this, our boys that.
You go and check, you find maybe that the bottom torso is gone or he's disemboweled.
Were you?
Yeah, just check and see. Maybe there's half of them eating and the other half is just bobbing along, right? Well, sorry to tell you, dude, but the body won't bob anymore. It will go down. It will fill with water and sink. So you're not going to check anything.
Very afraid of the sharks? Were the sharks coming up to you?
Well, they...
No, he's not afraid of sharks. Look. He's not afraid of sharks because he knows that, first of all, they don't exist. And secondly, he knows that everything he's saying is BS. He wasn't afraid of anything.
I'd say I had sharks within 6 or 8, 10 feet of me, but
I'm just kind of like buddy with the sharks, and it don't matter if they're within 6 or 8 to 10 feet. I mean, everybody else is scared crapless because I'm such a big war hero. No, I'm a big Canaanite liar.
For some reason they didn't attack me.
Some reason.
Yeah. So
For some reason, they didn't attack me. Isn't that mysterious? There's always this mysterious, for some reason, this happened or didn't happen.
day after day, you're losing more people then from your group?
Well, out of the group of 80, third day at noon, there's only 17.
Were you thinking I'm going to die at any moment, or what was kind of keeping you going?
Well, I have to say that,
Ah, there was the Pinocchio. Uh-huh. Little Pinocchio there.
Or what was kind of keeping you going?
Well, I have to say that...
You do realize now when they touch the nose, they're imitating the mythical cartoon figure Pinocchio, who when Pinocchio tells a lie, his nose will grow. So by now, the man is telling these lies, his nose has really grown quite a bit. And he knows it's time to tell everybody that's watching him he's a liar.
Family back home, mom, dad, and brothers and sisters, and a certain brunette that was waiting for me. And she waited, and we were married in 47, and she was with me 71 years.
So were you also praying, or were...
Oh, there's never a moment, hardly. You're desperate, and you see someone else that hasn't made it, or someone when there was only 3 of us, to see that one sailor that I don't know who he was, to see his head dropped in the water, and I shook him and said, "Hang in there, help will be here soon."
Well, notice she asked, "Are you praying?" And he's avoided the question. Do you know why? Because the Canaanites do not pray to Almighty God. They make contact with the demons and the devil.
And I tried to encourage him. The second time I checked him, the same thing. The third time I checked him, it's too late. He's gone. So it's just Lieutenant Charles McKissick and myself. And we were there when this plane flying over looking for submarines spotted an oil slick in the water. That's along a miracle. But he came to check to see what that oil slick was. And in so doing, he sees boys scattered.
So he's pretty slick. Once again, there's your reference to boys. Boys. He sees boys scattered. Belittling. Now that's part of what they do. And Eustace Mullins brings some of this stuff out in his book. Alright? You have to kind of pick up on some things and what Eustace Mullins says about the Canaanites. And that's who they are. They're Canaanites. They are worshipers of Baal. And they are individuals that should have been wiped out when Joshua took the promised land. Because he was commanded to get rid of all of them. But he didn't. And hence the Canaanites survived that.
He says maybe 25-mile bodies, but
25 miles of bodies. 25, 2 plus 5 is 7. There's your Zion.
he could not land those wheels, but he could radio back to Paloux, and Adrian Marks and the PBY says, that'll take me an hour and a half to get there. And he comes, and when he picked up the first survivor, USS Indianapolis.
Well, and Edgar, what do you attribute, why do you think you were able to survive when so many of your fellow Marines and sailors did not?
Just like one sailor says to me many times over in North Carolina, and I've been over and spoken different times, and he says, they asked why he made it, and he said, never, never, never give up.
Edgar, tell me what, you were in the Marine.
Okay, so it starts the interview again, but once again, what sparked it for me, all this, was this book, Left for Dead, and the little scene in Jaws where they're talking about the ship, the Indianapolis, and then it triggered this young man, or this stooge, or this plant, to so-called make a report on the Indianapolis. And again, it's all BS. There's no truth in it at all. As Dave would say, nobody died, nobody got hurt on the USS Indianapolis. Thank you for watching.